Hello my dear students, welcome to CMIS online classes. In today's class, in this video, for the students of standard 7, we'll start the new chapter from our English grammar, that is chapter 15, clauses. So in this chapter, we'll study about clauses. We will understand what are clauses, what are the types of clauses, how to identify each type of clause in sentences. So we will study all these about clauses in this video from this chapter. Okay, but before that we will see the warm-up section that we have in the very first page of this chapter. So let us have a look what is given here in this warm-up section. So it is written here in this warm-up section, state whether these groups of words are sentences, phrases or clauses. So in this chapter we are learning about clauses. Now in this warm-up section we have given the groups of words. From these groups of words we have to identify whether each group of word is a sentence, a phrase or a clause. Now to complete this warm-up section, to complete this exercise, we have to be very much clear about the concept of sentences, phrases and clauses. Okay, so a sentence is also a group of words, a phrase is also a group of words, a clause is also a group of words. But what differences do they have? Sentences, phrases and clauses. We need to clarify the differences among sentences, phrases and clauses. So if we understand the definition of the sentence, a sentence is a group of words that always gives us a meaningful sense. That means if we read that group of words, it always gives us meaningful sense. That means it conveys a complete meaning. Okay. Now, phrases are also a group of words. Phrases are also the groups of words. But after reading that group of words, it does not give us meaningful sense. Why? Because they do not have either a subject or a finite verb. Okay, understood? That means phrases never give us any meaningful sense. Okay, but what about clauses? Clauses are also the groups of words that may or may not give us meaningful sense. A sentence always gives us meaningful sense. Phrases never give us meaningful sense, but clauses may or may not give us meaningful sense. But what is the difference between a phrase and a clause? A phrase never has either a subject or a finite verb, but a clause always carry a subject and its verb. That means in a clause we always find a subject and its finite verb. Okay, but what is the differences between a clause and a sentence? A sentence always gives us meaningful sense, but a clause may or may not give us a complete सेंस. ओके, तो क्लॉज हमें मीनिंगफुल सेंस दे भी सकता है, नहीं भी दे सकता है. दैट मीन्स अ क्लॉज कैन ऑल्सो बी अ मीनिंगफुल सेंटेंस. ओके, सो हाउ टू फाइंड आउट द क्लॉज? सो क्लॉजेस कैन बी द parts of sentences. Phrases also can be the parts of sentences, but clauses are those parts of the sentences that carries. If we separate the clauses from the sentences, each clause carry a finite verb and its subject. Okay, we will understand with the help of this exercise, this warm-up section also, whether each group of word is a sentence, phrase or a clause. Okay, so I hope you have understood. You have understood the differences among sentences, phrases and clauses. A sentence always gives us a meaningful sense. Okay, that means sentences may be the combination of clauses. When 2 or 3 clauses are joined, they make a meaningful sentence. Okay, clauses and clauses when they are combined together, clause and clause when they are combined together, they form a meaningful sentence. That means a sentence can be separated or divided into parts depending upon the number of clauses a sentence carries. Okay, so in those clauses we may have a clauses with meaningful sense also, and a clause without any meaningful sense also. So if the sentences have been formed with the combination of clauses, if in those clauses if we find the clause with meaningful sense, that is independent clause. But if we find among those clauses, if we find a clause that has no meaningful sense but at least carry a subject and its main verb, a finite verb, then that clause is called a dependent clause. Okay, that we will understand at the later part of this video about the types of clauses. Okay, so when 2 or more clauses combine together to make a meaningful sense, a meaningful sentence, from that sentence we may separate that sentence, divide that sentence into the number of clauses. Okay, so from those numbers of clauses, if we see that a clause is a meaningful sentence, that clause is called an independent clause or a principal clause or a primary clause. Okay, but if we see that the clause which is combined with another clause in a sentence does not give a meaningful sense but has a finite verb and its subject, then that clause is called a dependent clause. Because why dependent clause? Because it depends upon another clause, primary clause, another clause, that means main clause, to give a meaningful sense. But this clause which do not give us meaningful, which does not give us meaningful sense but has a finite verb and its subject, it is a dependent clause or a subordinate clause. Because it is a clause because it has a subject and its verb. That means a clause can be separated into divided into subject and predicate because it carries a subject and its verb. Okay, whether the clause gives us a meaningful sense or not, but it can be divided into subject and predicate. A phrase can never be divided into subject and predicate. Okay, because it does not carry either a subject or a finite verb. Okay, a sentence can always be divided into subject and predicate. Okay, a clause can always be divided into subject and predicate, but a phrase can never be divided into subject and predicate. A sentence always gives us a meaningful sense. Okay, but a clause may or may not give us a complete sense. A sentence can be the combination of clauses. When we divide sentences into the parts, depending upon each part having a finite verb and their subjects, then the sentences can be divided into numbers of clauses. And among those clauses, if a clause gives us a meaningful sense, it is a meaningful sentence, but there it can be understood as a clause because it has been combined with other clauses to make a meaningful sense. Okay, so that clause which gives us a meaningful sense is an independent clause or a primary clause or a main clause. But the part of the sentence that carries a finite verb and its subject but does not give a meaningful sense. To give a meaningful sense, this clause needs the help of another clause, that is the primary clause, that is the main clause, that is the principal clause. Okay, so at that time, the clause which does not give us a meaningful sense is a dependent clause. Okay, I hope you are clear with the concept regarding the differences among sentences, phrases and clauses now. So now we will go with this warm-up section to identify whether each group of words given here is a sentence, a phrase or a clause. Okay, so let us have a look. So in the first question we have, what do you plan to do today? So if you read this group of words, it gives us a meaningful sense. So it is a sentence. Okay. Now, if it doesn't rain, यदि बारिश नहीं होता है, if it doesn't rain. So if you read this group of words, it does not give us a meaningful sense. Okay. But if you separate this group of words into subject and predicate, it can be divided. Okay, it can be separated. How? Because it carries the subject and verb. The sentence is about the subject it and the verb doesn't rain. Okay, so this is the subject and this is the predicate. Okay, so though this group of words does not give us meaningful sense, it can be divided into subject and predicate because it carries a finite verb and its subject. So it is a clause. Understood? Now, when you come to this third question, it is written here, the sunflowers in the field. So, did you have any sense? The sunflower in the field? The sentence is about the sunflowers, but this group of words does not carry any finite verb and it does not give us a meaningful sense. So it is a phrase. Now, that is close to our hive. So what is this? That is close to our hive. So the sentence is our close and we have finite verb is, that is close to our hive. So if you read this sentence, this group of words, it does not give us a meaningful sense, but it can be divided into subject and predicate because it has the subject that and a finite verb is here. Okay, so here this group of words can be said as a clause. My friend. What about my friend? Okay, this is a phrase. Phrase means at least there should be more than one word. Okay, who stays in Park Hive? So who stays in Park Hive? जो Park Hive में रहता है. So what about who? We don't know. So this is a clause. Okay, has invited me. So we have finite verb here, but we don't have the subject. Okay, we have no meaningful sense here. So we have no subject here. Okay, so it is a phrase. Okay, now the child has a toy which is made of metal. The child has a toy which is made of metal. So this is a complete sentence. Okay, this is a sentence. Now if you see here, if you divide this sentence into two parts, it can be divided into the child has a toy. Okay, the child has a toy, full stop. Now, which is made of metal. So, which is made of metal? See, the child has a toy. This is a meaningful part of the sentence. Okay, and it has a finite verb also, which is made of metal. So, here, if you divide this part of the sentence, which is made of metal, it can be divided into subject and predicate because it has the subject which and is the finite verb here. Okay, so here which is here used as the conjunction, but if you divide this sentence and separate into this group of words into subject and predicate, this which is used as the subject. Okay, but if you read this whole sentence, this WH word which is used as the conjunction, as a conjunction. Okay, so here this sentence can be separated into two clauses. One is the child has a toy which is made of metal. If you read this, the child has a toy, it gives us a meaningful sense. Okay, it gives us a meaningful sense. So this is the primary clause or principal clause. This is a principal clause or primary clause or a main clause. Okay, but if you read only this part of the sentence which is made of metal, we do not get any meaningful sense, but at least it carries a finite verb and its subject. So this is also a clause, but this is a dependent clause. This is a dependent clause, or we can also say it a subordinate clause. This dependent clause is dependent upon this principal clause to give a meaningful sense. Okay, because if we read this part only, it does not give us a meaningful sense. After it is used, after this clause is combined with this first principal clause, then only it gives us a meaningful sense. So the clause which depends upon the principal clause to give a meaningful sense, it is a dependent clause or a subordinate clause. I hope you have understood. I hope this concept of differences among sentences, phrases and clauses is now more clear for you all. Okay, so as a whole, the child has a toy which is made of metal is a meaningful sentence. Okay, a metallic toy, this is a phrase. Okay, what about a metallic toy? Okay, we do not have any finite verb here, only a metallic toy is written here. Unless you run very fast. Unless you run very fast. So unless you run, the sentence is about you and the finite verb run. So this is a clause. Okay, when you get back from the trip, जब आप trip से वापस आएंगे. So the sentence is about you and the main verb is get. Okay, now this group of words is also a clause. Okay, now catch a cold. Catch a cold. This is a phrase. So I hope you are clear about the definition of clauses. Clauses are those groups of words that may or may not give a meaningful sense. They give us a meaningful sense when they are combined with other clauses to make a meaningful sentence. Okay, when more than one clause, when the clauses are combined together to make a meaningful sense, in that case, if a clause gives us a meaningful sense, that clause is an independent clause, a principal clause, a primary clause. But if in the same sentence, if we have another clause which does not give us a meaningful sense, that clause is a dependent clause. Okay, because it depends upon the another clause which is primary clause or principal clause or an independent clause. Okay, so this clause which does not give us a meaningful sense, that is dependent or subordinate clause. Okay, I hope you have understood the differences among sentences, clauses and phrases now. So let us have a look let us have a look what is written here about the definition of clause or or clauses. A clause that does not see. A clause is a group of words which has a verb and a subject. Which has a verb and a subject. Clause ग्रुप ऑफ वर्ड्स है जिसके पास एटलीस्ट वर्ब और सब्जेक्ट रहता है. ओके, अ सेंटेंस ऑल्सो हैज अ वर्ब एंड इट्स subject, but a sentence always gives us a meaningful sense, but a clause may or may not give us a meaningful sense. When it gives us a meaningful sense, it is a principal clause. When it does not give us a meaningful sense, it is a dependent clause. Okay, so clauses, when they are combined together, make a meaningful sentence. A clause that does not need another clause to make a meaningful sense is called the principal or main clause. वो clause जो खुद में एक meaningful sense देता है हमें, which is meaningful in itself, is a principal or main clause. Okay, here principal is written incorrectly, PLE, principal clause or main clause. Okay, a clause that has to depend on another clause in order to make sense is called a subordinate or dependent clause. Okay, like if you see, he gave me a book which was gifted by his father. Okay, now see, he gave me a book which was gifted by his father. Now if you see here, he gave me a book. If you read, if you divide this sentence into two clauses, this can be divided into two clauses. Like one is, he gave me a book which was gifted by his father. Which was gifted by his father. If you read these two clauses, he gave me a book, this clause can be written independently because it is meaningful in itself without this another part of the sentence or another clause. Okay, so this is an independent clause. Okay, but now again read this clause, which was gifted by his father. If you read only this part of the sentence, which was gifted by his father, this group of words, this does not give us any meaningful sense, but it at least has a finite verb and its subject. Okay, so this part of the sentence, this clause is a dependent clause. Okay, this is dependent clause. Why? Because it depends upon the another clause here, upon the main clause to give a meaningful sense. Okay, now see, we have so many kinds of clauses here. Okay, we have to understand. We already have understood about the differences among the principal clause and the main clause also. There are two types of clauses. One is principal clause and another is main clause. Okay, now we have to understand the kinds of non-subordinate clauses like noun clauses, adjective clauses and adverb clauses, and also the other clauses in the later part of this video, in the another part of this video. So for today's, this is the this is the first video on this chapter. In our next video on this same chapter, we will understand about the kinds of subordinate clauses. Okay students, thank you so much for attending my class for today. Thank you so much.